People are running scared because they are looking even at CNN, which has Joe Biden with a 41% approval rating, 58% of people disapproving. And to put that into context for you, when Biden has lost CNN, that is not ideal. Here is the trajectory. In September, Joe Biden's approval rating in a CNN poll, 52%. October, 50%. November, 48%. And now here, as we are sitting in the beginning of February, he has fallen down to 41%. It is a free-for-all falling situation for Joe Biden. And there's really no strategy at play here. Biden, while we were live on the air in the first couple of hours, addressed the current situation, the inflation numbers, and more. What is his answer? His suggestion is let's spend more money, build back better, still makes sense according to Joe Biden. It is a floundering failure of a Biden presidency. Here he was a little bit earlier trying to address all of these calamities.
This does not raise anyone's, if you're making less than $400,000, you're not paying a single penny more in taxes. Not a single penny more in taxes. And it does not increase the deficit because it's paid for. It's fully paid for.
Can we understand this, everybody? It's madness. First of all, inflation is really the most regressive of taxes because it eats away at the earnings and the buying power of those who are dependent upon wages and don't have assets, aren't piling money into the stock market, aren't watching their home values, home prices, currently going up all over the place. So it's hurting people, the decision to spend this money in this way and to spend even more money given what we're seeing. And then also the promise that it's paid for, that's never true, right? I mean, if they could just look at the history of what ends up happening and who ends up picking up the tab for these things, you're going to have companies that will do less hiring. You're going to have individuals that will do less investing and starting of businesses. And they're talking about a massive tax raise that simply can't be paid for, Clay, only by people making more than $400,000 a year. But this is how they sell it. They push it through. No one actually reads the text of the bill. But I think that people are recognizing that he just doesn't have the political capital right now to get this through. You mentioned Joe Manchin before. The Democrat Party is not in a position to get this Build Back Better done. And so it just turns into empty talking points and more class warfare rhetoric from a guy who pretends to be Scranton Joe on the choo-choo train all the time on Amtrak. But as we know, lives in mansions, is worth, what, $15 million at least that we know of? Never mind the 10% from the big guy from Hunter, Yeah.
That's right. Look, Buck, I don't even know what Biden does at this point. Let's just kind of walk through the scenarios that he's facing. Worst border crossings ever. Murder rates for police officers that are the highest in over 25 years. Murder rates in many big cities hitting all-time highs. COVID is right now massively more significant in terms of cases on this date than it was a year ago on the same date. Deaths are higher with COVID than they were a year ago on this same date. And the Build Back Better, as we talked about earlier, Joe Manchin has basically said inflation is so bad, it's at a 40-year high, that he's not going to support any more governmental spending until we get our house in order. And so we've got this decision with the Supreme Court, which I think will distract for a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be some sort of fundamentally politically game-altering situation because it's a Democrat appointed Stephen Breyer getting replaced by a Democrat-appointed justice. Like, he's floundering in a way that we haven't seen a president flounder in many of our lives.
Yeah, whoever the pick is for the Supreme Court from Biden is going to get through, basically. I mean, Republicans might push on some issues and do a little bit of grandstanding, a little bit of asking about judicial philosophy. But as I've said, it's going to get through. This candidate's going to get through with some Republican votes too. It's not even going to be a party line.
I think that's
vote.
likely.
You're going to see a number. I would say probably 4 or 5 Republicans would go along with it. And so then the rest can vote against it, knowing that it's going to sail through. It doesn't really matter anyway. So I think that Biden is looking for something now. I do think the pivot to health care will be interesting because, Republicans, I know it's, it's never preaching to the choir when, as a member of the conservative side of things, you start talking about how we're lacking messaging appeal or we're not saying what needs to be said. What is the GOP message on health care right now? What are they saying about it? Remember, we were going to have repeal and replace, didn't really get through under Trump. We got the skinny repeal version that didn't even really get through. We got rid of the individual mandate, but Democrats are going to have to come up with something, and health care costs are a place where they can pick up, I think, a bit of ground here. I think that's so. I hope that the GOP, I hope the RNC have something in the tank for this one, have something on the shelf, because otherwise we're going to get caught unaware because they need something, Clay. They're going to have to pull some kind of a move for Biden and the Democrats to avoid annihilation.
Yeah, we talked about if you were advising the Biden administration as the midterms come closer, I think they're hoping that the Supreme Court wipes out Roe v. Wade. I've predicted that I don't think they will. I think they'll allow the Mississippi bill to become law, which basically drops down abortion from 23 or 24 weeks where it is now to 15 weeks. And if you actually look at the data, the number of abortions that are happening inside of that window are not very substantial, but it's a big battleground. I don't think they'll allow Texas, but that to me is kind of the Hail Mary for the Democratic Party because they're going to go after suburban women and say, oh, you're the abortion
but remember,
issue.
They tried the war on women issue with Kavanaugh, and it actually backfired. It actually probably cost Democrats control of the Senate in that cycle. There were a couple of Senate seats that likely went with the Republican, stayed with or switched to Republican because it was so ugly and so dishonest what they did to Kavanaugh. And I remember, the polling inside of West Virginia for Senator Manchin during that, something like 70% of West Virginians or 80% of West Virginians, for example, were, and that's obviously why Manchin voted for confirmation. So I don't think the Supreme Court's going to be their issue. I think that they're hoping the media will carry a lot of water for them. Nobody thinks that January 6th is going to do anything other than keep people who watch CNN and MSNBC entertained with their delusions of the coup that might come at any moment, or the constant threat of white supremacy. There's not a lot that they can point to that isn't a disaster. And now on the other side of the messaging as well, I mean, the border needs to – wait, remember I think Joe Scarborough actually even – Clay, check this out.
He's even acknowledging it.
Just because Joe Scarborough says it doesn't mean it's not true, everybody. I have to preface this. Just because Scarborough says it, as loathsome as many of his ideas have been in recent years, doesn't mean he's wrong. He's right on both of these issues. He's trying to preach to Democrats, listen.
This is going to be a huge issue in 2022. And from what I've seen, Democrats are way behind the ball on this issue. Of course, people get angry. They'll send tweets. I don't care. If you're a Democrat and you're in one of those swing districts in the House, crime better be the top issue, one of the top issues that you're talking about, and getting crime down, because this is the issue that's on people's mind. And another issue that's on people's mind in those swing districts that Democrats don't want to talk about, don't shoot me, I'm only the piano player, the southern border. Democrats never talk about that. That's on swing voters' mind.
Now, he's right, Clay, but the part of this that's left out that he won't tell the MSNBC audience is that the Democrats can't talk about those issues because the only logical fixes to those issues go completely counter what they've been pushing for years now.
I think the Democratic House is on fire, and Republicans just have to avoid getting caught in the flames themselves, right? Because this is a referendum on the first 2 years of the Biden presidency. Midterms are always a referendum on the existing president. And so Democrats, look, there's nothing good that they can sell, but Republicans have to avoid getting the fire spread to them so the Democrats can argue, oh, the whole place is on fire, and Democrats and Republicans are equally to blame. Because I do think that will be one of the other angles that Biden will probably try to address, because the overall congressional approval rating is even lower than his. Now, the reality is people tend to like their own congressman, and hate everybody else, right? That's kind of the way that polling in this situation results. But if you're Biden and your numbers are at 41%, they may try to argue, well, this is a do-nothing Democratic Congress because of Republicans. I don't think that works. But again, don't light yourself on fire is the strategy for Republicans at this point.
I also think that there's one thing that they would have tried if they could, which was the Obama refrain after the 2010 midterms of obstruction. They would be making, they try that a little bit now, and that's why they discussed getting rid of the filibuster and all the rest of it. But the belief was that Obama was competent in the role, and it was those big, bad, mean Republicans standing in his way. It doesn't work that way now because Democrats aren't even going along with Biden, and there's not a belief in Biden's competency even from within their own party. So that would be, they would do the obstruction, all screaming and crying about that. But it doesn't work because you can't even get all the Democrats in the Senate to go along, and everyone thinks Joe Biden's a clown.